Hey there, welcome. I'm here to help you relax tonight. So before you get too cozy, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It really makes us feel like the global community it is. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's begin our evening together. Story 14. The Honeyed Words of Mr. Gray. The rain was falling in soft, gray sheets the day Mr. Gray moved into the office next to mine. I watched from my window as he directed the movers with calm, efficient gestures. He was a man of unremarkable appearance, medium height, medium build, hair a neutral shade of brown, but there was an unsettling stillness about him, a vacuum of expression that made you want to fill it with something, anything. He introduced himself the next morning. "Arthur Gray," he said, his voice a smooth, warm baritone that seemed to pour into the space between us like honey. "I understand we're to be neighbors." His smile was perfect, but it didn't reach his eyes. They were the color of a winter sky, and just as cold. I, Lena Petrov, was a ghost in my own life, a quiet copy editor who preferred the company of words to people. But Mr. Gray's attention was flattering. He began stopping by my office daily, always with a compliment. "That color brings out the intelligence in your eyes, Lena. Your meticulousness is so rare. It's a form of art." His words were always perfect, always what a lonely heart might yearn to hear. He listened with an intensity that felt like being seen for the first time. Slowly, I began to talk. About my work, my solitary apartment, my dreams that felt too small to share with anyone else. He drank it all in. And then, the suggestions began. "It's just a thought," he'd say, leaning against my doorframe. "But that report you're working on, wouldn't it be stronger if you approached it from this angle?" The angle was always his. And it was always, infuriatingly, better. My work improved. My confidence, paradoxically, shrank. Every success felt like his, not mine. He started with small critiques on my life. "That cafe you like, Lena? The coffee is mediocre. I know a better place." And I found myself going to his place, which was, of course, superior. He recommended books, films, music, all impeccably chosen, all molding my taste to mirror his. I saw less of my few friends. Their conversations started to feel shallow, unrefined, compared to the stimulating talks with Mr. Gray. He never said anything bad about them. He'd just sigh softly and say, "It's charming how Sarah can be so uncomplicated." Or, "Michael means well, but he doesn't challenge you intellectually, does he? Not like you deserve." The seeds of doubt were planted with such care, such tenderness, that I didn't feel them taking root until it was too late. My world narrowed to the axis between my apartment and my office, with Mr. Gray as the sun at the center of both. His approval became the oxygen I breathed. His slight, almost imperceptible frowns could send me into a spiral of anxiety for days. I was being curated, polished, erased, and redrawn in his image. The first time I pushed back was over something trivial, a manuscript I was editing where I loved the author's quirky, flawed style. He thought it was messy. "It needs a firm hand, Lena. Your sentimentality is clouding your judgment." For the first time, I disagreed. Vehemently. He didn't get angry. He just went very still. The warmth drained from his voice, leaving it flat and cold. "I see," he said. "You're choosing to be lesser today." He didn't speak to me for a week. The silence was agony. I felt invisible, insignificant, lost without his guiding voice. I finally broke, apologizing profusely, promising to be more open-minded. His smile returned, warmer than ever. "I just want what's best for you, Lena. You know that, don't you?" I did, and that was the most terrifying part. The isolation was complete. My phone, once an occasional lifeline to the outside world, now sat silent. Mr. Gray was my only contact. He'd started giving me a lift to work, then home again. "It's on my way," he'd say, though I never told him my address. He just knew. One evening, in his car, he turned to me. The streetlights flashed across his expressionless face. "You're not happy, Lena." It wasn't a question. It was a diagnosis. I'm fine," I stammered, unnerved. "Your apartment is a cage. It reflects your smallness, your fear." His voice was soft, hypnotic. "You need a space that inspires growth. I have a guest room. It's quiet, secure, a place where you can truly focus on your work, on becoming who you're meant to be." My heart hammered against my ribs. The idea was insane. Unthinkable. But his words wrapped around the tiny, trapped part of me that screamed for something more, and they made it sound not just reasonable, but inevitable. This was the next logical step in my improvement. I don't know, I whispered. He placed a hand over mine. His skin was cool and dry. Let me take care of you, Lena. You don't have to think anymore. I'll do the thinking for both of us. That should have been the moment I ran, but the promise was too seductive. To surrender the exhausting burden of myself. To let someone else be in charge. I was so very, very tired. I nodded, a tiny, almost imperceptible movement. His smile was beatific. Wonderful. The move was a blur. He handled everything. It was easier not to fight it. His house was a minimalist dream. All clean lines, muted colors, and perfect order. There were no personal photos, no knickknacks, nothing that spoke of a life lived. It was a showroom. My new room was the same. A bed, a desk, a lamp, a blank slate. My old life was packed into boxes and stored in his spotless basement. You won't need these, he said, his tone leaving no room for argument. He was right. I didn't. The first few days were peaceful. He made my meals, nutritious, flavorless affairs. He set a rigorous work schedule for me. I edited. I read books he selected. I engaged in stimulating conversation with him over dinner. I was the perfect pupil. But then, the rules began. The rules were not written down. They were conveyed through subtle corrections, through that faint, disappointed frown I had come to dread. Dinner was at 7 p.m. precisely, not 7:01. The correct way to hold a fork. The correct way to organize my desk. The correct thoughts to have. He seemed to know when my mind wandered to my old life, to my friends, to the messy, unpredictable world outside his sterile walls. He would gently steer me back, his voice a soft, relentless guide. That thought doesn't serve you, Lena. Let it go. Your nostalgia is for a version of yourself that was weak. We're building something stronger now. I began to feel his gaze even when I was alone. I started preempting his corrections, policing my own thoughts, my own actions. The walls of the beautiful, quiet house felt less like a sanctuary and more like the pains of a terrarium. I was on display. I was being studied. I tried to access the internet once, on a hidden old phone I'd found tucked in a forgotten pocket of a bag. He appeared in the doorway of my room within minutes, his expression one of profound sadness. Oh, Lena, seeking validation from that chaotic void? I thought you were beyond that. He held out his hand. Silently, I gave him the phone. I didn't ask how he knew. My world shrank to the dimensions of his house. Time lost its meaning. My identity, already fragile, began to dissolve entirely. I was becoming a reflection of his will, a perfect, empty vessel. The only thing that remained was a tiny, stubborn shard of the old Lena, buried deep. It screamed in the silence of my mind. It remembered sunlight that wasn't filtered through double-paned glass. It remembered laughter that wasn't a measured, approved response. One night, during our silent, perfect dinner, I looked up from my plain grilled chicken and steamed vegetables. I looked at his calm, placid face, and I spoke without his permission. I want to leave. The words hung in the air, ugly and discordant, shattering the exquisite silence. Mr. Gray slowly put down his fork. He didn't look angry. He looked interested, as if I were a lab rat that had performed an unexpected trick. Leave? He said, his voice dangerously soft. But Lena, this is your home. You are home. We've come so far together. Why would you want to go back to being unfinished? The word unfinished hung in the air, a verdict. It should have crushed me, but for the first time, it sparked something else. A flicker of defiance. I am not a project, I said, my voice trembling but clear. I am a person. Mr. Gray smiled then, a slow, chilling smile that finally reached his wintry eyes. It wasn't warm. It was predatory. Are you? He asked, tilting his head. Let's see. He stood up from the table. Come with me, Lena. It wasn't a request. It was a command that vibrated through the very air. My body, so conditioned to obey, almost moved on its own. But the shard of the old Lena held firm. I remained seated. His smile didn't falter. He walked around the table and stood behind my chair. His hands came to rest on my shoulders. They were heavy, immovable. I said, come with me. He applied pressure, forcing me to stand. I was led out of the dining room, down a hallway I'd never been allowed to enter, to a plain white door. He produced a key, a small, silver key, and unlocked it. The room inside was a mirror image of my bedroom, but on the bed sat a woman. She was around my age, with mousy brown hair and a vacant expression. She was wearing my clothes. She looked up as we entered, and her face arranged itself into a pale imitation of my own nervous smile. "Lena," Mr. Gray said, his voice dripping with false warmth. "This is Caroline." "Caroline, this is Lena." The woman, Caroline, nodded at me. "Hello, Lena," she said. Her voice was a hollow echo of my own. My blood ran cold. I looked from her to Mr. Gray, my mind refusing to process what I was seeing. "When one masterpiece proves itself to have a flaw," Mr. Gray said conversationally, his hand still a vice on my shoulder. "A crack in the glaze. It's time to start on a new canvas. Caroline here is much more receptive. She doesn't have your unfortunate sentimental attachments." He had a replacement. He'd always had a replacement waiting. I was expendable. The horror of it broke the last of his conditioning. I wrenched myself free from his grip, stumbling back into the hallway. Now, Lena," he chided, taking a step toward me. "There's no need for drama. You can still be useful. You can help me train Caroline. It would be a fitting final project for you." He reached for me, and I ran. I ran blindly, my heart a wild animal crashing against my ribs. His house, once a maze of perfection, became a prison I had to escape. I could hear his calm, measured footsteps behind me. He wasn't running. He was strolling. He knew I had nowhere to go. I burst into the kitchen, skidding on the polished floor. The back door. It was my only chance. I fumbled with the lock, a complex, modern thing, my fingers slipping in panic. "Lena," his voice came from the doorway, smooth as silk. "This is beneath you. This chaos." The lock clicked. I tore the door open and stumbled out into the cold night air. I didn't stop. I ran across the manicured lawn, through a gap in a hedge, and out into the quiet, suburban street. I kept running, expecting to hear his car, to see his calm face at every corner. But there was nothing. Just the sound of my own ragged breaths and the pounding of my feet on the pavement. I ran until I found a small, all-night convenience store, its fluorescent lights a blinding beacon of normalcy. I stumbled inside, collapsing against a rack of magazines, sobbing. The clerk, a pimply teenager with wide eyes, called the police. The police came. They were skeptical. A man who brainwashes women in a perfect house. It sounded like the plot of a bad movie. But I was hysterical, half-starved, and my story was consistent. They went to Mr. Gray's address. The house was empty, spotless. There was no furniture, no personal effects, no Caroline. It looked like a model home waiting for a buyer. The neighbors said a Mr. Gray had lived there, but he kept to himself. He'd mentioned he was a consultant, often away on business. They hadn't seen him in a few days. There was no evidence, no proof. I was a woman with a mental breakdown, telling a wild story. I was released. I had nowhere to go. My old apartment was re-rented. My possessions were gone. I was a ghost again. I found a room in a dingy boarding house. I got a job as a dishwasher. I tried to rebuild, but the world felt thin, unreal. I jumped at shadows. Every calm-faced man made my heart stop. And then, the letters started arriving. The first letter arrived at the boarding house, addressed to me. The paper was thick, expensive. The handwriting was precise, familiar. "Dearest Lena, I hope this finds you well. Your departure was educational. Caroline, unfortunately, lacked your spark. She was ultimately unsuitable. The flaw, it seems, was in my selection process, not in you. I've taken the liberty of reflecting on our time together. You were right. A true masterpiece cannot be forced. It must be coaxed, revealed. I apologize for my earlier heavy-handedness. I am undertaking a new project, a gallery exhibition. I would be honored if you would consider contributing, not as a subject, but as a collaborator. Think of what we could create together as equals. There is so much more I have to learn, and I believe, now, that only you can teach me. Yours in anticipation, Arthur." I tore the letter into 100 pieces, my hands shaking. It was a lie. Every word was a carefully set hook. He wasn't sorry. He was bored, and I was the most interesting project he'd ever started. The letters kept coming. Weekly, sometimes daily. They were never threatening. They were critiques of the world. Observations about people on the street, about art in the newspapers, always ending with the same refrain. "You see it too, don't you, Lena? The imperfection, the mess. Together, we could make it beautiful." He was getting into my head again, but from a distance. His words were a virus. I started seeing the world through his eyes, judging, critiquing, finding everything lacking. I hated it. I hated him. But a part of me, the part he had sculpted, agreed with him. I stopped opening the letters. I threw them away unread. But I knew what they said. I could feel his voice in my mind, a constant, critical whisper. I tried dating. A nice man named Ben from the grocery store. He was kind, funny, normal. On our third date, as he laughed at a stupid joke, I heard Mr. Gray's voice in my ear as clear as day. Such a simple creature. His laughter is like the braying of a donkey. You deserve a symphony, Lena, not this noise. I flinched. Ben asked what was wrong. I couldn't explain. I ended the date early and never called him back. Mr. Gray was still shaping me. His absence was just another tool. The final letter wasn't sent through the mail. I found it slipped under my door one morning. The paper was different. Thinner. Crumpled. The handwriting was still precise, but tighter, more frantic. Lena, they are closing in. My methods have attracted attention. Not everyone appreciates the pursuit of perfection. I need to disappear. But before I do, I must see you. One last time. There is something I must give you. The key to your freedom. To mine. Meet me at our beginning. The office building. Tonight, midnight. Come alone. Or don't come at all. The choice, finally, is yours. Hey, it was a trap. It had to be a trap. Every instinct screamed at me to burn the letter, to call the police, to never think of him again. But I couldn't. The key to your freedom. What did that mean? And worse, a terrible, traitorous part of me was curious. I had to know. I had to see him. To confront the architect of my ruin. I went to the office building at midnight. It was dark, locked, but the side door was slightly ajar. My heart hammering, I stepped inside. The building was silent, empty. The only light came from the emergency exit signs, casting a sickly green glow. I walked to my old office. The door was open. He was sitting at my old desk, in my old chair. He looked diminished. Thinner. His perfect suit was rumpled. He looked human. For the first time, he looked scared. Lena, he said, his voice raw. You came. What do you want, Arthur? I asked, my own voice surprisingly steady. He held up a small, battered journal. This is everything. Names, dates, locations, of the others. Before you, after you, the ones who didn't work out, the ones the police are looking for. He tossed it onto the desk. It's my confession, my masterpiece of ruin. Take it to the authorities. It's your freedom, and it's my end. I stared at the journal. It was a weapon. It was power. It was the truth. Why? I whispered. Why give this to me? He looked at me, and for a single, shocking moment, his wintry eyes were clear, devoid of calculation. They were just tired. Because you were the only one who ever said no, he said. You have no idea how beautiful that was to me. Then his eyes flickered over my shoulder. Fear returned to his face. They're here. Go. Out the back. Now. He wasn't lying. I could hear sirens in the distance, getting closer. I grabbed the journal from the desk. I looked at him one last time. The man who had tried to break me and had, instead, given me the means to destroy him. I turned and ran. I didn't look back. I fled out the back door and into the alley. The journal clutched to my chest like a talisman. The sirens grew louder, then stopped at the front of the building. I kept running, disappearing into the labyrinth of the city. I found a diner, open all night, and slid into a sticky booth. Under the weak glow of the overhead light, I opened the journal. It was worse than I could have imagined. Page after page of meticulous notes. Women's names. Their likes, their dislikes, their insecurities. How he'd approached them. How he'd broken them. Where they were now. Some had been released, like me, broken and adrift. Others had locations listed next to their names. Remote places. Shallow graves. I was in there. Chapter and verse. My entire life, dissected and analyzed. My destruction, planned and executed with the precision of a master surgeon. And at the very end, a new entry. Caroline. Her real name was Sarah Willows. She was from 2 towns over. Reported missing 6 months ago. Next to her name, he'd written, unsuitable, too fragile. The structure collapsed under pressure. And a set of coordinates. I sat there, frozen, as the sun began to rise. The horror was so vast it was numbing. I had in my hands the end of Arthur Gray, and the stories of dozens of women whose lives he had erased. I went to the police. The real police, the state police. I handed over the journal. I told my story again. This time, they listened. The investigation was a media frenzy. Arthur Gray was arrested. The bodies were found. He never said a word in his own defense. He just watched the proceedings with that same cold, detached interest. I was hailed as a hero, the one who got away, the one who brought down the monster. But I didn't feel like a hero. I felt like his final project. He had given me the journal not out of remorse, but as the last, perfect step in my transformation. He had made me the author of his destruction, the curator of his downfall. It was the ultimate act of manipulation. Even in defeat, he was shaping the narrative. I tried to go back to my life, but I was different. The world was different. I saw potential monsters in every kind face. I heard his honeyed words in every compliment. I started having nightmares, not of him chasing me, but of me sitting in his perfect house, nodding along as he explained his plans. In the dreams, I was smiling. The trial was swift. The evidence was overwhelming. Arthur Gray was convicted on multiple counts of kidnapping, assault, and murder. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. I attended the sentencing. I wanted to see his face when the judge said the words. I needed to see him lose. When the sentence was read, he showed no emotion, no anger, no fear, no regret. He just sat there, perfectly still. As they led him away, he turned and his eyes found me in the crowd. And he smiled. It was a small, private smile. A smile of perfect understanding. It wasn't the smile of a defeated man. It was the smile of an artist looking at his finished work. He had taken a lonely, invisible copy editor and turned her into a key witness, a central figure in a national tragedy, a woman forever defined by his actions. He had made me interesting. He had made me important. And he knew that I would carry him with me for the rest of my life. His voice would always be in my head. His critique would always color my world. I was free of him, but I would never be free of what he had made me. I left the courtroom into a barrage of cameras and shouted questions. I didn't answer them. I walked away, the heroine of the story, the survivor. I moved to a new city. I changed my name. I tried to disappear again, but the fear was now a part of my DNA. I trust no one. I accept no kindness. I am constantly editing myself, watching for flaws, terrified of being found unsuitable again. Sometimes, at night, I take out the box where I keep the few remnants of my old life. And tucked at the bottom, under a pile of photos, is a single, expensive piece of paper. The first letter he sent me after I ran. I don't read it. I don't have to. I have every word memorized. His voice is my constant companion. He was wrong about so many things, but he was right about one. He is my home, and I am his. Forever.